Who invited this maid? She doesn't belong here. A loud voice hissed at a young black girl, Sophia Chen, standing in the hall. The subtle glances and raised eyebrows spoke volumes about what these people really thought when they saw someone who didn't look like their usual crowd. The crystal chandeliers of the $100 million Hamptons mansion cast elegant shadows across marble floors as America's wealthiest families mingled at the most exclusive party of the year. But something was about to shatter this perfect world forever. A young black girl, Sophia Chen, stood in the center of the opulent foyer as 200 of the country's most powerful people turned to stare. The trouble had started when Preston Sterling, the 28-year-old heir to the family fortune, cornered her near the library. "Look, sweetheart," he had said, swirling his expensive whiskey, "I don't know what charity scholarship brought you here tonight, but this isn't the kind of place where your kind should feel comfortable." When Sophia asked what he meant by her kind, his response was devastating. "Come on, don't play dumb. Black girls like you come to these events for one reason only, but let me save you some time. Old money families like ours don't mix with your kind." That's when William Sterling IV himself had lost complete control. The 58-year-old patriarch, red-faced with fury, screamed at the top of his lungs, "I don't care whose bastard daughter you claim to be. Get this pretender out of my house before I call the police." But Sophia Chen didn't flinch. Instead, her voice cut through his rage like ice. "Mr. Sterling, you just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic life." She pulled out her phone and speed-dialed a number. "Dad, it's Sophia. Burn it all down. The Sterling deal, the merger, everything. They want to play games? Let's play." The room held its collective breath. Who was Sophia Chen really? And why did her single phone call seem to carry the weight of a billion-dollar threat? If you're already hooked on this story of hidden identities and billion-dollar revenge, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will completely blow your mind. If you believe in karma, type yes in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. You will definitely get a response from Living Stories. Because Sophia Chen wasn't just some party crasher. She was someone far more powerful than any of them could have imagined, and her true identity was about to turn their world completely upside down. To understand the magnitude of what just happened with that phone call, you need to know exactly who these people really are, because nothing about this story is what it seems on the surface. Let's start with Sophia Chen herself. At just 18 years old, she's already accomplished more than most people do in a lifetime. While other teenagers were worried about prom dates and college applications, Sophia was graduating from MIT with a degree in quantum computing. But here's what makes her story truly extraordinary. She's the secret daughter of Richard Chen, one of the most powerful tech moguls in the world. Richard Chen built Chen Tech Industries from nothing into a $47 billion empire that revolutionized how the world thinks about artificial intelligence and quantum computing. His name appears on Forbes lists right next to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. But what most people don't know is that he has a daughter he's kept hidden from the public eye for nearly 2 decades. Sophia's mother, Maria Santos, was a brilliant Stanford professor specializing in advanced mathematics when she had a brief but passionate relationship with Richard during his early entrepreneurial days. When Sophia was born, Richard made a decision that would define both their lives. He would keep her existence completely private to protect her from the gold diggers, kidnappers, and media vultures that circle around billionaire families like sharks. Growing up in California with her mother, Sophia had no idea that other kids her age couldn't solve complex mathematical equations in their heads, or that having a quantum computing lab in your basement wasn't normal. By age 16, she was already developing algorithms that would later become the foundation of her own startup company. Richard watched from the shadows, secretly funding her education and ensuring she had every opportunity to develop her incredible mind, but always from a distance. Now, at 18, Sophia runs her own quantum computing company that's already being courted by Google and Microsoft for acquisition deals worth billions. She's everything her father hoped she would become. Brilliant, independent, and completely unaware of just how much power flows through her veins. But let's talk about the family that just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The Sterlings represent everything that's wrong with old money America. And their story is about to become a cautionary tale that will be told in business schools for generations. William Sterling IV, 58 years old and worth $12 billion, inherited every penny of his fortune from ancestors who built their empire on shipping and steel in the 1800s. He's never created anything, never innovated anything, never risked anything. He's simply been born into wealth and spent his entire life believing that made him superior to people who actually earned their money. William's worldview is simple and toxic. He believes that bloodlines determine worth, that old money is somehow more noble than new money, and that people like Sophia Chen will never belong in his world, no matter how much they achieve. He's about to learn exactly how wrong he is. His wife, Catherine Sterling, 55 years old, comes from railroad money that dates back to the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. She spent her entire life in society circles, where your family tree matters more than your character. And she's mastered the art of polite racism, the kind of discrimination that hides behind smiles and backhanded compliments. Their son Preston, 28 years old and Harvard-educated, represents the worst of both parents. He's arrogant enough to think his last name makes him untouchable, but stupid enough to be secretly destroying the family business with investments so bad they would make a gambling addict cringe. What his parents don't know is that Preston's reckless financial decisions have put Sterling Industries on the brink of bankruptcy. Madison Sterling, their 26-year-old daughter, has turned casual racism into content for her 5 million social media followers. She's built her entire online persona around being an entitled rich girl who thinks her family's money gives her the right to mock anyone she considers beneath her station. Tonight, her live stream is about to become evidence in the biggest social media scandal of the year. But it's not just the Sterling family in that ballroom. There are other players in this story whose roles are about to become crucial to what happens next. James Park, Sophia's business partner and closest friend since childhood, understands exactly what she's going through because he's mixed race and has faced similar discrimination in elite circles. He's also brilliant in his own right, handling the business side of their startup, while Sophia focuses on the technical innovations. When he walks into that party tonight and sees what's happening to his best friend, his reaction is going to surprise everyone. Margaret Whitfield, 82 years old, represents what old money could be if it came with character instead of just cash. She knew Sophia's grandmother, Grace Chen, back when they were both at boarding school together, and she's about to recognize something in Sophia's eyes that will change the entire dynamic of the evening. Robert Kim, a financial journalist who's been investigating Sterling Industries for months, is at the party to gather information about their rumored financial troubles. He has documents on his phone that will prove just how desperately the Sterling family needs the deal they're about to lose. Elena Rodriguez used to work as a financial manager for Sterling Industries until she discovered they were falsifying their financial reports to hide massive debts. She's been waiting for the right moment to expose the truth, and tonight is going to provide the perfect opportunity. And then there's Richard Chen himself, the invisible puppet master who's been watching every moment of this party through the security camera system he had installed for what was supposed to be a simple business meeting. Right now, he's sitting in his car outside the mansion, watching his 18-year-old daughter being humiliated by people who have no idea they're destroying their own lives with every word they speak. If you're already feeling the tension building and you want to see how this story of hidden power and inevitable justice unfolds, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next is going to leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about power, privilege, and revenge. Because right now, as these wealthy families continue their party, they have no idea that they're celebrating their last night of ignorance. The Sterling family is about to discover that in the modern world, character matters more than bloodline, and new money backed by real power will always destroy old money built on nothing but inherited arrogance. The stage is set, The players are in position, and the real drama is just beginning. What happened next at the Sterling Mansion would become the opening act of the most expensive lesson in humility ever taught to America's elite. But it started with what seemed like a simple business arrangement gone wrong. Sophia Chen arrived at the Sterling family's annual Old Money Gala with a very specific purpose. Chen Tech Industries was considering an enormous $1.8 billion acquisition of Sterling Industries, a deal that would have saved the Sterling family from the hidden bankruptcy that was just months away from destroying their century-old empire. But the Sterlings had no idea who she was, and their assumptions about this 18-year-old black woman were about to cost them everything. To the Sterling family and their guests, Sophia looked like just another tech startup nobody, trying to network her way into circles where she didn't belong. They saw her youth, her race, and her unfamiliar face, and immediately decided she was beneath their notice. This was their first mistake, but it wouldn't be their last. The trouble began the moment Sophia stepped through the mansion's grand entrance. Catherine Sterling, the 55-year-old hostess whose railroad fortune had bought her a lifetime of unearned superiority, approached Sophia with the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Excuse me, dear," Catherine said, her voice dripping with condescension, "but I think you're in the wrong place. The Diversity Scholarship Mixer is next weekend." When Sophia politely corrected her and explained that she was an invited guest with legitimate business at the party, Catherine's mask of politeness began to slip. Her response revealed everything you need to know about how these people really think. "Oh," Catherine said, her voice taking on a tone that suggested she was dealing with something unpleasant. "Well, I suppose times are changing. We're trying to be more inclusive these days." The word inclusive came out of her mouth like she was discussing a necessary but distasteful medical procedure. This was Catherine Sterling's idea of being progressive, acknowledging that people like Sophia existed while making it clear they weren't really welcome. But if Catherine's racism was subtle, her son Preston's approach was like a sledgehammer to the face. The 28-year-old Harvard graduate, emboldened by expensive whiskey and a lifetime of privilege, decided to corner Sophia near the mansion's library. Preston assumed Sophia was some kind of tech blogger or journalist trying to get interviews with the wealthy families. "Look, sweetheart," he said, swirling his drink with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. "Whatever tech blog you write for isn't getting an interview tonight. This is a family gathering, not a publicity opportunity." When Sophia tried to explain her actual reason for being there, Preston's response escalated into the kind of overt racism that would have made his ancestors proud. He looked her up and down with disgust and launched into a speech that revealed the ugly truth about how America's old money families really view successful black people. "Come on, don't play dumb," Preston said, his voice getting louder as other guests began to notice the conversation. "Black girls like you come to these events for one reason only, to find some rich white guy to take care of you. But let me save you some time here. Old money families like ours don't mix with your kind. We have standards to maintain, and those standards don't include whatever diversity quota brought you here tonight." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several guests gasped softly, but nobody intervened. This was the ugly reality of high society. Racism was perfectly acceptable as long as it was delivered with the right accent and expensive clothing. But Preston wasn't finished. He leaned closer to Sophia, his voice dropping to what he thought was a confidential whisper, but was actually loud enough for half the room to hear. "Look, I get it. You probably worked really hard to get wherever you think you are in life, but here's the thing you need to understand. No matter how much money you make with your little tech company, no matter what degrees you hang on your wall, you'll never have what we have. You'll never belong in our world because you weren't born into it." What Preston didn't realize was that every word he spoke was being absorbed by someone who could destroy his family's financial future with a single phone call. But the evening was just getting started. The real climax of this opening act came when William Sterling IV himself decided to address the entire party. The 58-year-old patriarch, feeling confident in his role as host and master of his domain, called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," William announced, his voice carrying across the marble foyer with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Tonight we're reminded of something very important about our great nation." What followed was a speech that would have fit perfectly at a white supremacist rally, except it was being delivered at a charity gala by one of America's most respected business leaders. "We're reminded why bloodlines matter," William continued, his eyes deliberately moving to Sophia as he spoke. "Why heritage matters, why the families that built America deserve to remain in control of America." The room was completely silent now, every guest hanging on his words. William Sterling was about to deliver the most expensive racist rant in business history. "You see, some people are born to lead, and others are born to follow. Some people are born with the breeding and the character that comes from generations of excellence. And others," he paused dramatically, looking directly at Sophia, "others are born to serve those who truly deserve power. Breeding always shows, ladies and gentlemen. Always." The applause that followed was scattered but enthusiastic. These people who prided themselves on their education and sophistication had just cheered for one of the most blatantly racist speeches ever delivered at a social gathering. They had no idea they were applauding their own financial destruction. But in the back of the room, someone was watching this entire spectacle with growing recognition. Margaret Whitfield, the 82-year-old society matriarch whose family had been wealthy since before the Civil War, was studying Sophia's face with increasing intensity. Margaret leaned over to her companion and whispered words that would soon prove prophetic. "That girl has the same eyes as Grace Chen. Richard's mother was my dearest friend at boarding school decades ago." Margaret Whitfield was the only person in that room who understood exactly what was about to happen, because she was the only one who recognized the family resemblance that connected Sophia to one of the most powerful men in the world. If you're enjoying the story, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to show you exactly how privilege and racism can blind people to their own destruction. But let me ask you, do you think Sophia should have revealed who she was immediately to shut down the racism? Or was she right to let these people show their true colors first? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because understanding the psychology behind her decision is crucial to appreciating the masterpiece of revenge that's about to unfold. The Sterling family thought they were demonstrating their superiority, but they were actually providing evidence for their own downfall. And Sophia Chen was quietly taking notes on every word they said. What happened next turned an already ugly situation into something so vicious and public that it would destroy reputations, crash stock prices, and become a case study in how racism and arrogance can literally cost billions of dollars. The Sterling family was about to escalate their attacks on Sophia Chen in ways that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Madison Sterling, the 26-year-old social media influencer with 5 million followers, decided this was the perfect moment to create content for her audience. She pulled out her phone and started live streaming, completely unaware that she was about to document the most expensive act of racism in social media history. "Hey guys, Madison here from the family gala," she said into her phone camera, her voice bubbling with that fake enthusiasm that influencers perfect. "And you are not going to believe what I'm seeing tonight. There's this random black girl here who literally thinks she belongs with America's founding families." Madison turned her camera towards Sophia, zooming in on her face without permission. The comments started flooding in immediately. And they were exactly as vicious as you'd expect from an audience that had been trained to laugh at Madison's privilege and cruelty. "Like, the audacity is literally insane," Madison continued, her voice getting more animated as she fed off the energy of her live stream. "She's walking around here like she owns the place, trying to network with families that have been wealthy for centuries. It's giving major social climber vibes, and not in a good way." The comment section was exploding with racist jokes, cruel observations about Sophia's appearance, and speculation about how she had tricked her way into the party. Madison read some of the comments out loud, laughing at the cruelest ones. "Oh my God, you guys are so bad." Madison giggled, reading from her screen. "Someone just asked if she came through the service entrance. Another person wants to know if she's here to serve drinks. Y'all are terrible. But honestly, same energy." What Madison didn't realize was that her live stream was being screen recorded by dozens of viewers, creating permanent evidence of her family's racism that would soon go viral for all the wrong reasons. Every word she spoke, every cruel laugh, every racist comment she endorsed was being preserved forever. "I'm literally going to follow her around and see what kind of mess she causes," Madison announced to her followers. This is the kind of content you can't script, people. Real-life social climbing in action. Madison spent the next 20 minutes stalking Sophia with her phone camera, providing running commentary about everything from her dress to her posture to the way she held her champagne glass. Her followers ate it up, sending increasingly cruel suggestions for how Madison should expose this pretender who dared to exist in their space. But Madison's social media attack was just the beginning. While she was busy turning racism into content, her mother, Catherine, was organizing something even more sinister. Catherine Sterling gathered 3 of her closest society friends, women whose families controlled old money fortunes in oil, banking, and real estate. These were the kinds of women who had spent decades perfecting the art of destroying people's reputations with whispered conversations and social exclusion. "We need to handle this situation before it gets out of hand," Catherine told her friends as they watched Sophia from across the room. "That girl is clearly here for one reason, and we all know what it is." The 4 women followed Sophia when she stepped away to use the powder room, cornering her in the marble bathroom like a pack of predators who had finally isolated their prey. What happened next was a masterclass in how wealthy white women weaponize their privilege to intimidate and humiliate people they see as threats. "Listen carefully, little girl," Catherine said, her voice taking on the cold authority of someone who had spent a lifetime destroying people who crossed her. "We know exactly what you're doing here, and we want you to understand that it's not going to work." The other women formed a semicircle around Sophia, blocking her path to the door. These weren't teenagers bullying someone in a school bathroom. These were grown women worth hundreds of millions of dollars, using their power to terrorize an 18-year-old. "Gold digging your way into our circles might work on some new money families who don't know any better," said Rebecca Morrison, whose family controlled a banking empire worth $8 billion. "But we've seen your type before. We know exactly what you're after. You think you can come here in your little dress, batting your eyelashes at our sons and husbands, and somehow trick your way into our world," added Patricia Whitmore, whose oil fortune dated back to the Texas boom of the 1920s. "But let me tell you something, sweetheart. Old money doesn't fall for those kinds of games." The 4th woman, Eleanor Blackstone, whose real estate empire owned half of Manhattan, delivered what she thought was the killing blow. "We've already made some calls. By tomorrow morning, every important family in the country will know exactly who you are and what you tried to do here tonight. Your little social climbing career is over before it started." They thought they were threatening some desperate social climber who would break down in tears and run away. They had no idea they were making threats against the daughter of one of the most powerful men in America. And every word they spoke was about to become evidence in a legal and financial nightmare that would consume their families for years. But the evening's humiliations were far from over. As Sophia left the bathroom and tried to return to the main party, she encountered Preston Sterling again. And this time he was drunk enough to say things that would end his career and his family's reputation. Preston had been drinking expensive whiskey for hours, and the alcohol had stripped away what little filter he normally maintained. When he saw Sophia walking back toward the main ballroom, he decided this was his moment to make a proposition that he thought was generous. "Hey, there you are," Preston said, stumbling slightly as he approached her. "I've been thinking about our conversation earlier, and I want to make you an offer." What came out of Preston's mouth next was so crude and racist that it would have been shocking coming from a drunk college student, let alone a Harvard-educated heir to $1 billion fortune. Look, I can see you're trying really hard to make connections here. Preston slurred, stepping uncomfortably close to Sophia. And I appreciate the hustle. I really do. So here's what I'm thinking. You give me one night with real American royalty, if you know what I mean, and I'll make sure you get some startup funding. Preston actually thought he was being generous. In his twisted worldview, he was offering this social climber exactly what she wanted: money and access to his family's wealth, in exchange for sexual favors that he believed she should feel honored to provide. I'm talking about serious money here, Preston continued, his voice getting louder as other guests began to notice the conversation. Maybe $50,000, $100,000 for your little tech company. That's more than someone like you probably makes in a year. When Sophia didn't immediately respond with gratitude, Preston's tone shifted to irritation. Come on, don't act all offended. We both know why you're really here. This is just cutting through the bullshit and getting straight to business. Several guests had stopped their own conversations to watch this spectacle unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed entertained, but nobody intervened. This was the ugly reality of how these people operated. They would watch someone be sexually harassed and racially humiliated as long as it wasn't happening to them. But William Sterling himself was about to take this evening to a level of public humiliation that would become legendary in the worst possible way. The charity auction that was supposed to be the highlight of the evening became the stage for the most racist public display in recent American history. Ladies and gentlemen, William announced as the party gathered in the main ballroom for the charity auction, tonight we're not just raising money for worthy causes, we're also celebrating the values that make our great nation strong. William had decided to turn the charity auction into a platform for his racist ideology, and he was about to use Sophia as a prop in a display of power that would destroy everything he had worked to build. Now, I know we have some diverse guests with us tonight, William said, his eyes finding Sophia in the crowd. And I think it's important that we help these people understand how things work in proper American society. What happened next was so shocking that several guests pulled out their phones to record it, not realizing they were documenting evidence that would be used in lawsuits and congressional hearings. So I'm going to auction off something very special, William continued with a cruel smile. I'm offering diversity training sessions for our international guests who might benefit from learning American business etiquette. William gestured directly at Sophia as he spoke, making it clear that she was the target of his auction item. The crowd laughed nervously, understanding that they were witnessing something that crossed every line of acceptable behavior. Do I hear any bids for helping our friend here learn how to properly conduct herself in civilized society? William asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Perhaps someone would like to sponsor some lessons in appropriate behavior for people who aren't quite sure how our world works. The auction was a complete humiliation, designed to reinforce Sophia's supposed inferiority in front of 200 of the most powerful people in America. William Sterling thought he was demonstrating his dominance and putting an uppity black girl in her place. He had no idea he was providing evidence for the biggest racial discrimination lawsuit in corporate history. But just as the humiliation seemed to reach its peak, something changed in the room's energy. The massive front doors of the ballroom opened, and James Park walked in. James took one look at the scene, his best friend being publicly humiliated while 200 wealthy people watched and laughed, and his expression shifted to something that would have made a wiser man run for cover. But James wasn't just angry about what was happening to Sophia. He was carrying information that was about to change everything. James walked straight to Sophia, ignoring the stares and whispers of the crowd. When he reached her, he leaned in close and whispered something that made her eyes widen with a mixture of shock and cold satisfaction. "Sophie," James said quietly, his voice urgent but controlled, "your father's been watching the security feeds from his car outside. He's seen everything that's happened tonight. He's furious, and I mean nuclear-level furious. The acquisition papers are ready to sign, But after what he's witnessed, James paused, making sure Sophia understood the full implications of what he was telling her. He's ready to burn their entire world down. The $1.8 billion acquisition, the additional partnerships worth another $5 billion, all of it. He's watching them humiliate his daughter, and he's about to show them what real power looks like. What James didn't say out loud, but what his expression made clear, was that Richard Chen had seen enough. The most powerful tech mogul in America had watched his 18-year-old daughter be subjected to racist attacks, sexual harassment, and public humiliation by people who had no idea they were destroying their own lives with every word they spoke. The Sterling family thought they were having fun at the expense of some random black girl who had wandered into their exclusive party. They had no idea they had just spent the evening systematically destroying themselves in front of the one person in America who had the power to end their family's financial empire with a single decision. If you want to see what happens when the most powerful man in tech decides to teach a lesson about racism and respect, you need to hit that subscribe button right now, because what's about to unfold will redefine everything you thought you knew about power, revenge, and justice. Because right now, as the Sterling family continued their party, they had no idea that their victim was about to become their judge, jury, and executioner. The most expensive lesson in human decency ever taught was about to begin, and it would leave their billion-dollar empire in ruins. As the evening's humiliations continued to pile up, something else was happening behind the scenes that would soon reveal the true scale of the Sterling family's miscalculation. Information was starting to flow to Sophia from sources the Sterlings never knew existed, and each piece of intel was building toward a revelation that would make their racist attacks look even more catastrophically stupid than they already were. The first crucial piece of information came from an unexpected source. Elena Rodriguez, a woman in her early 40s who had been quietly observing the evening's events from the edge of the crowd, approached Sophia during a brief moment when she was alone near the mansion's library. Elena had worked as a senior financial manager for Sterling Industries for over 8 years before her conscience forced her to resign 6 months earlier. What she had discovered during her time managing their books would have shocked even the guests at tonight's party if they had known the truth. "Excuse me," Elena said quietly, making sure no one else could hear their conversation. "I need to tell you something important about the people who have been treating you so badly tonight." Elena's voice carried the weight of someone who had been carrying a terrible secret for months, waiting for the right moment to reveal what she knew. "I used to manage Sterling Industries' financial records," Elena continued, her eyes scanning the room to make sure they weren't being overheard. "What I'm about to tell you might explain why they're so desperate to make this deal with your father's company." Elena pulled out her phone and showed Sophia documents that painted a devastating picture of the Sterling family's real financial situation. "They're not just struggling," Elena said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They're 3 months away from total collapse, complete bankruptcy. Everything you see here tonight, this mansion, these cars, this party, it's all being held together with loans and creative accounting that would make Enron executives blush." The numbers Elena showed were staggering. Sterling Industries, the company that was supposed to be worth $12 billion, was actually carrying debts of over $2.3 billion that they had been hiding from investors, creditors, and even their own board of directors. "This deal with Chentech isn't just business for them," Elena explained, her voice heavy with the implications. "It's literally life or death. Without that $1.8 billion acquisition, they'll be bankrupt by Christmas. Their century-old family empire will be gone forever." Elena's revelation meant that while the Sterling family had been spending the evening humiliating and attacking Sophia, they were actually destroying their only chance of financial survival. They were spitting in the face of their potential savior, while their empire crumbled around them. But Elena wasn't the only person at the party who understood the true dynamics of what was happening. Margaret Whitfield, the 82-year-old society matriarch who had been watching Sophia with growing recognition all evening, finally decided it was time to reveal what she knew. Margaret approached Sophia with the careful dignity of someone who had navigated high society for over 6 decades and had learned to recognize real class when she saw it. "My dear," Margaret said, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose opinion actually mattered in these circles, "I need to speak with you privately. There are things about tonight that you need to understand." Margaret led Sophia to a quiet corner of the ballroom where they could talk without being overheard by the other guests who were still laughing about the evening's entertainment. "I knew your grandmother, Grace Chen," Margaret said, her eyes softening with genuine warmth and memory. "She was the most elegant woman I ever had the privilege of knowing. We were roommates at boarding school together over 50 years ago." Margaret's revelation hit Sophia like a thunderbolt. Her grandmother Grace had died when Sophia was very young, and she had always wondered about the woman who had raised her father during his early years. "Grace used to tell me about her son Richard," Margaret continued. "How brilliant he was, how determined, how he was going to change the world with his ideas about technology and computing. She was so proud of him, even when other families looked down on them for being immigrants who had built their wealth through actual work instead of inheritance." Margaret paused, studying Sophia's face with the same intensity she had shown all evening. "Your father called me last week," Margaret revealed, "and told me to watch over you tonight. He said his daughter would be attending the Sterling Gala, and that I should make sure she was treated with the respect she deserved. I had no idea it would be this ugly." Margaret's confession revealed that Richard Chen had been planning this evening far more carefully than anyone realized. He had positioned allies in the room, people who would witness exactly how his daughter was treated by America's so-called elite. But the most damning evidence of the Sterling family's desperate situation came from Robert Kim, the financial journalist who had been investigating their company for months. Robert had been at the party posing as a society reporter, but his real purpose was to gather final confirmation of the story he was preparing to publish. Robert approached Sophia discreetly, recognizing that she might be interested in the truth about the people who had been attacking her all evening. "I'm a financial journalist," Robert said quietly, "and I've been investigating Sterling Industries for the better part of a year. What I've discovered is going to destroy them, but I think you should see this first." Robert showed Sophia documents on his phone that revealed the full scope of the Sterling family's financial deception. Bank records, falsified reports, hidden debts, and desperate loan applications painted a picture of a family that was drowning in debt while maintaining the facade of wealth. "They've been falsifying their financial reports for over 2 years, Robert explained, scrolling through page after page of evidence. "The $2.3 billion in debt I mentioned earlier? That's just what I've been able to document. The real number could be even higher." Robert's investigation had uncovered a web of financial deception that would have sent any normal business executives to prison. The Sterling family had been cooking their books, hiding losses, and lying to investors while living off borrowed money and the reputation of their ancestors. "Without the Chentech acquisition," Robert said, his voice heavy with the implications, "they'll be bankrupt by Christmas. Not struggling, not downsizing, completely bankrupt. Everything will be gone." As this information swirled around her, Sophia realized she needed to step outside and process what she had learned. But more importantly, she needed to speak with her father, who she knew had been watching the entire evening unfold. Sophia walked out onto the mansion's marble terrace overlooking the ocean, pulling out her phone to call the one person who could make sense of everything that was happening. "Dad," she said when Richard Chen answered on the first ring, "I know you're watching everything through the security camera system you had installed for tonight's meeting." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Richard spoke, his voice carried a cold fury that Sophia had never heard before. "Sophia," Richard said, his words measured but deadly, "I've seen every moment of what they've done to you tonight. The racism, the humiliation, the threats, the sexual harassment. I've heard every word they've said, and I've watched 200 of the wealthiest people in America stand by and let it happen." Richard's voice grew colder as he continued. "I brought you to that party because I wanted to see what kind of people we would be doing business with. I wanted to know if the Sterling family deserved our help in saving their failing company." The pause that followed was loaded with implications that would soon reshape the entire American business landscape. "I've heard enough," Richard said, his voice carrying the finality of a death sentence. "These people don't deserve our mercy. They don't deserve our money. They don't deserve to survive what's coming next." Richard Chen, worth $47 billion and commanding influence over entire industries, had just declared war on the Sterling family. The most powerful tech mogul in America had watched his 18-year-old daughter be systematically humiliated, and now he was ready to use every tool at his disposal to destroy the people responsible. But Sophia had one more revelation that would complete the picture of just how thoroughly the Sterling family had miscalculated their situation. "Dad," Sophia said, her voice taking on a tone of cold satisfaction, "there's something else you should know. Something I've been working on as insurance in case tonight went badly." When Sophia returned to the party and found James, she pulled him aside to share information that would turn their understanding of power completely upside down. "James," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something that changes everything about tonight." James leaned in, sensing that whatever Sophia was about to reveal would be the final piece of a puzzle that had been building all evening. "For the past 6 months, I've been quietly buying Sterling Industries stock through shell companies," Sophia revealed, her eyes gleaming with the kind of strategic thinking that had made her father one of the most successful businessmen in history. James's eyes widened as the implications hit him. "How much stock are we talking about?" 23%, Sophia said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had been planning for this moment. "I now own nearly a quarter of the company that these people think they control." The revelation was staggering. While the Sterling family had been living off borrowed money and hiding their debts, the 18-year-old black woman they had spent the evening humiliating had been quietly buying up their company piece by piece. "They don't just need our $1.8 billion acquisition to survive," Sophia continued, her voice taking on the cold calculation that ran in her family's blood. "They need our approval as their largest minority shareholder. I've been positioning myself to control their fate for months, and they just spent the entire evening giving me every reason to destroy them." If you're starting to understand the full scope of what the Sterling family has walked into, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next is going to redefine everything you thought you knew about power, revenge, and justice in corporate America. But do you think Sophia and her father planned this entire evening as a test of the Sterling family's character? Or were they genuinely hoping to do business with decent people? Let me know in the comments, because understanding their strategy is crucial to appreciating the masterpiece of revenge that's about to unfold. Because right now, as the Sterling family continued their party, they had no idea that their victim had just become their largest minority shareholder, their only hope of financial survival, and their worst nightmare all rolled into one. The most expensive lesson in human decency ever taught was about to reach its devastating conclusion. The moment that would become known as the most expensive 7 minutes in the history of American high society was about to begin, and it started when Sophia Chen decided she had heard enough. William Sterling IV was in the middle of his closing speech, thanking his guests for attending what he called another successful celebration of American excellence, when something unprecedented happened. Sophia Chen walked straight across the marble ballroom floor, her heels clicking with the confidence of someone who had just realized she held all the cards in a game everyone else thought they were winning. The room fell silent as this 18-year-old black woman who had been their target of humiliation all evening approached the microphone where William Sterling stood. 200 of America's wealthiest people watched in stunned confusion as Sophia reached out and gently but firmly took the microphone from William's hand. "Excuse me," Sophia said, her voice carrying across the ballroom with crystal clarity. "But before this evening ends, I think everyone in this room should know exactly who they've been talking to tonight." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a champagne bubble pop. William Sterling stepped back, his face showing the first flicker of uncertainty he had displayed all evening. Something about Sophia's tone, her confidence, her complete lack of fear, was finally penetrating the fog of his arrogance. "My name is Sophia Chen," she announced, her voice steady and strong. "My father is Richard Chen, founder and CEO of Chen Tech Industries." The gasps that erupted throughout the ballroom sounded like a collective intake of breath from 200 people who had just realized they might have made a terrible mistake. But Sophia wasn't finished. "We came here tonight to finalize the acquisition of Sterling Industries," she continued, her eyes moving across the crowd of faces that were rapidly shifting from confusion to horror. "A $1.8 billion deal that would have saved this family from the bankruptcy that's coming in less than 3 months. The word bankruptcy hit the room like a bomb. These people had spent the entire evening believing they were in the presence of old money royalty. And now they were discovering that their hosts were actually financial fraudsters living on borrowed time. William Sterling's face went completely white. The blood drained from his features so quickly that several guests later said they thought he was having a heart attack. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly, but no words came out. The man who had spent the evening lecturing about bloodlines and breeding was discovering that he had just destroyed his family's only chance of survival. Preston Sterling, who had been holding another glass of expensive whiskey while his father spoke, completely lost control of his motor functions. The glass slipped from his hand and crashed to the marble floor, sending crystal shards and amber liquid across the white stone. The sound of breaking glass seemed to snap the room back to reality. But it was Madison Sterling's reaction that truly captured the magnitude of what was happening. She was still live streaming when Sophia made her announcement, and her phone was pointed directly at the scene unfolding on stage. Her 5 million followers watched in real time as the expression on Madison's face shifted from confusion to recognition to absolute terror. "Oh my God," Madison whispered into her phone, her voice barely audible but picked up clearly by her microphone. "Oh my God, we're so screwed." The comments on Madison's livestream were exploding faster than anyone could read them. Her followers, who had spent the evening laughing at the random black girl trying to infiltrate high society, were now realizing they had been watching the systematic humiliation of one of the most powerful families in America. The hashtag #Sterling Racism was already trending on 3 different platforms. But in the midst of all this chaos and terror, one person in the room began to clap. Margaret Whitfield, the 82-year-old society matriarch who had known Sophia's grandmother, stood up from her table and began a slow, deliberate applause that cut through the silence like a blade. "Grace Chen would be so proud," Margaret announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose opinion actually mattered in these circles. "Your daughter has more class in her little finger than this entire room combined." Margaret's support was like a crack in a dam that had been holding back the flood of realization that was about to drown the Sterling family. Other guests began to understand that they had not just witnessed racism. They had participated in the destruction of a business deal that their own investments might have depended on. William Sterling finally found his voice, but what came out was the desperate babbling of a man whose world was collapsing in real time. He rushed toward Sophia, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated, replaced by the kind of panic that only comes when you realize you've made an irrevocable mistake. "Miss Chen," William said, his voice cracking with desperation, "please, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea who you were. If we had known, obviously we would have treated you with the respect you deserve." William's words were tumbling over each other as he tried to undo an entire evening of racist attacks and humiliation with a few sentences of groveling apology. "Surely we can work something out," he continued, his hands actually shaking as he spoke. "This is all just a big misunderstanding. We're reasonable people. We can fix this. Please, Just tell us what we need to do." The desperation in William Sterling's voice was so complete, so pathetic, that several guests later said it was painful to watch. This was a man who had spent his entire life believing that his wealth and status made him untouchable, and he was discovering that all of it could disappear because of his own stupidity and cruelty. But Sophia's business partner James had been busy during her announcement. While everyone's attention was focused on the drama unfolding on stage, James had connected his laptop to the mansion's main display screen, the same screen that had been showing elegant photos of the Sterling family's charitable works throughout the evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," James announced, his voice cutting through William's desperate pleading, "I think you all deserve to see some real information about the family you've been celebrating tonight." What appeared on the screen was a comprehensive financial analysis that laid bare the true state of Sterling Industries. Bank records, debt statements, falsified reports, and projected bankruptcy timelines painted a picture that contradicted everything these guests thought they knew about their hosts. "The Sterling family that you've been worshiping tonight," James said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone revealing a long-hidden truth, "is completely bankrupt. They've been living on borrowed money and lies for over 2 years. The numbers on the screen were devastating. $2.3 billion in hidden debt, falsified financial reports, desperate loan applications that had been rejected by every major bank in the country. The Sterling Empire was not just struggling, it was already dead. They just hadn't admitted it yet. Without the Chentech acquisition that they just destroyed with their racism," James continued, "Sterling Industries will be filing for bankruptcy before Christmas. Everything you see here tonight, this mansion, these cars, this lifestyle, will be seized by creditors within months." The revelation that their hosts were essentially financial fraudsters sent shockwaves through the crowd of guests. These people had based their own social standing partly on their association with the Sterling family. And now they were discovering that they had been celebrating with criminals who had been lying about their wealth for years. But if the guests thought the evening had reached its lowest point, they were wrong. Preston Sterling, who had been drinking heavily all night and whose world had just completely collapsed around him, was about to have a public meltdown that would become legendary for all the wrong reasons. Preston pushed through the crowd toward the stage where Sophia stood, his face red with alcohol and fury, his expensive tuxedo disheveled from his earlier stumble. When he reached the front of the crowd, he began screaming at Sophia with a rage that shocked even his own family. "You think your father's dirty tech money makes you better than us?" Preston screamed, his voice echoing through the ballroom with the unhinged fury of someone whose entire worldview was crumbling. "You think some new money computer nerd gives you the right to come into our world and destroy everything we've built?" Preston's meltdown was being live-streamed by his sister, recorded by multiple guests, and witnessed by 200 of the most influential people in America. Every word he screamed was being preserved for posterity, and every word was making his family's situation worse. "We built America," Preston continued, his voice getting higher and more unhinged with each word. "Our blood, our heritage. Our families fought in every war, built every railroad, created every industry that made this country great. Some immigrant's daughter doesn't get to come here and lecture us about respect." The racism that had been bubbling under the surface all evening was now exploding in full view of everyone present. Preston Sterling, Harvard-educated heir to a supposed billion-dollar fortune, was having a racist breakdown that would define his family's legacy forever. "You're nothing," Preston screamed, pointing directly at Sophia. "Your family is nothing. Your father is nothing. All the money in the world doesn't change what you are, and what you are is not us. You will never be us." Preston's meltdown was so complete, so unhinged, so publicly racist, that even some of his own family members were backing away from him in horror. This wasn't just a private expression of prejudice. This was a nuclear explosion of white supremacist ideology being broadcast live to millions of people around the world. But Preston still wasn't finished. His final words would become the most quoted racist rant in modern American history. "This is our country," he screamed, his voice breaking with fury and desperation. "This is our society. This is our world. And no matter how much money your people make, no matter what degrees you get, no matter what companies you build, you will always be outsiders looking in. You will always be pretenders. You will always be beneath us." The silence that followed Preston's meltdown was the sound of a family's reputation dying in real time. 200 of America's most powerful people had just witnessed the sterling heir reveal the ugly truth that lay beneath generations of supposed sophistication and culture. Because right now, as Preston Sterling stood screaming racist epithets at the daughter of the most powerful man in America, he had no idea that his words were about to summon a force that would end his family's century-old empire forever. The reckoning was coming, and it was going to be delivered by someone who made the Sterling family's wealth look like pocket change. What happened next would become the most talked-about entrance in the history of American business, and it began with the sound of massive oak doors opening at exactly the moment when the Sterling family thought their nightmare couldn't get any worse. Richard Chen stepped through those doors like a force of nature. At 55 years old, he carried himself with the quiet confidence that comes from building a $47 billion empire from nothing. Behind him walked a security detail and legal team that made it clear this wasn't a social visit. The room fell into absolute silence. 200 of America's most powerful people found themselves in the presence of someone whose wealth made their combined fortunes look like pocket change. The crowd began parting before him like the Red Sea, instinctively moving aside for someone whose power operated on a completely different level. Richard's eyes never left Sophia as he walked. There was pride in his gaze, but also a cold fury that seemed to lower the temperature of the entire ballroom. When he reached his daughter, he spoke his first words to the assembled guests. "I believe you've all met my daughter tonight," Richard said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. Richard stepped onto the stage and placed his hand protectively on Sophia's shoulder. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to properly introduce Miss Sophia Chen, MIT graduate at 18, quantum computing pioneer, and heir to the Chen Tech empire. More importantly, she's my daughter and the light of my life." The crowd listened in stunned silence as they realized the random black girl they had been mocking was more accomplished at 18 than most of them had been at 30. Richard's tone grew colder as he surveyed the room. "I've been watching tonight's events through the security system I installed for our business meeting. I've seen how you treated the most important person in my world." The revelation that Richard had witnessed everything sent shockwaves through the crowd. Their racism hadn't been private moments. It had been recorded by someone with the power to destroy them all. Sophia looked at her father, then faced the crowd. "Dad, they showed me exactly who they are tonight. I've canceled everything." Richard's response was immediate. "That's my girl. I raised you to never accept disrespect, regardless of how much money is on the table." What Richard announced next became the most expensive consequence of racism in business history. The $1.8 billion acquisition of Sterling Industries is terminated. The additional $5 billion in partnerships are gone forever. Sterling Industries will be bankrupt within 90 days. William Sterling staggered backward, realizing his family's empire had just been destroyed by his own hatred. "Everyone who stayed silent while my daughter was humiliated will remember this moment forever," Richard continued. "Sophia doesn't need your approval, but you desperately needed ours." While Richard spoke, Madison's livestream was exploding across social media. Sterling racism was trending worldwide. Sterling stock crashed 67% in after-hours trading. 3 major business partners called during the party to terminate contracts worth hundreds of millions. Richard delivered his final words. "My daughter offered you redemption once tonight. I'm not nearly as forgiving as she is." Father and daughter walked toward the doors side by side, the crowd parting in fear. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.